crime is up 5% in England and Wales, up 22% in London. There were just under 14,000 knife offences.
Over 14,000 stabbing attacks in London. A new Machete crime every 10 minutes. And Starmer's disapproval rating has hit 75%. Across the nation, from Manchester to London, nearly 100,000 people have reached boiling point. At 5:42 p.m, Stop the Boat, protesters demanded Starmer's immediate resignation, branding him Britain's #1 traitor, and in just 48 seconds, dozens of police vans arrived at the protest. Instantly, a brutal clash erupted. In 4 zones simultaneously, helicopters appeared in the sky. Local media declared nationalist thugs rampage on the streets. At 5:51 p.m, aerial footage emerged showing over 16 streets completely paralysed. 80 feet below, locals began surrounding dozens of officers. Tactical units initiated a rapid regrouping, bracing for something. Suddenly, opposition leader Farage declared, "While machete gangs roam free, the police suppress patriots." And 2 minutes later, it all began. Reports from the ground indicated up to 143 casualties across both sides. For a brief period, locals in balaclavas occupied 2 entire districts at once. Unexpectedly, Starmer declared, "Far-right groups face up to 4 years in prison," but this only sparked new clashes with the police. At 6:02 p.m, Save Our Kids groups threatened to storm migrant hotels. Immediately, police ordered the deployment of 6 units. But within 30 seconds, the vans were surrounded. Crowds began storming the police lines. 6:30 p.m, reports indicated up to 60 officers retreating in 3 directions simultaneously. But then, something happened that no one could have predicted. The White House joined in. UK protesters do not want to see illegals from Africa in their neighbourhoods. Trump's team directly hinted that they support the anti-government protests. At 6:50 p.m, sharp, unknown individuals began smashing storefronts. In a single hour, over 22 stores reported shoplifting. Analysts recorded nearly £5.5 million in losses. Across the country, waves with British flags called for Starmer's immediate resignation. A petition for a general election gathered over 200,000 signatures across Britain. Right after, across all social media, Starmer's address was scheduled for the morning, but at 9:43 p.m, total chaos erupted. Police units came under attack by protesters. Masked groups launched firework barrages across more than 8 locations simultaneously. In response, the police deployed armed reinforcements. At 9:50 p.m, those reinforcements faced a brutal assault. Unknown individuals began pushing officers back using explosive weapons. Over the radio, the transmission was clear. All units on the ground retreat from regions 7 and 9 immediately. Within hours, fires were recorded at 20 different sites. Finally, Keir Starmer issued a statement claiming the situation remains challenging but firmly under national control. Reality on the pavement paints an entirely different, bloodier picture. Nearly 50,000 stabbing incidents recorded over a single year suggest the exact opposite of security. Zombie-style blades and heavy machetes have rapidly become the standard accessory across Britain's urban centres. Analysts frequently question why local streets suddenly transitioned to such brutal, medieval forms of weaponry. This chilling truth is that the worst phase of the crisis has not even fully materialised yet. Opposition leader Nigel Farage recently stepped before the cameras to deliver a devastating assessment of the underlying data. Shockingly, over 80% of these violent attacks remain completely in the shadows. Uncovering the reason behind this massive statistical blind spot exposes a catastrophic failure at the border. Thousands of individuals from Africa are currently navigating the country without valid passports, identifiable fingerprints, or basic digital footprints. Law enforcement intelligence reports now describe turf wars that resemble imported tribal conflicts rather than typical youth disputes. public outrage naturally shifts toward the obvious question regarding immediate deportations of over 1 million illegals. Keir Starmer finds himself heavily accused of enabling this chaos through a policy of blatant, unchecked tolerance. Navigating the modern British legal system has become a masterclass in bureaucratic manipulation for undocumented offenders. Detained suspects routinely demand interpreters for incredibly obscure local dialects upon entering the courtroom. Finding someone fluent in these specific regional tongues is nearly impossible when fewer than 200 speakers exist nationwide. Cases are delayed for up to 12 months while the justice apparatus scrambles to accommodate these highly specific linguistic demands. When the translation hurdle is finally cleared, an entirely new layer of legal defense is deployed. Countless defendants suddenly announce a miraculous overnight conversion to Christianity while in custody. Others strategically align themselves with LGBTQ+ identities precisely as their removal hearings approach. Progressive human rights legislation dictates that deporting these individuals to their home nations would place them at risk of execution. Keir Starmer is categorically denying mass deportations. Also, judges sitting in overwhelmed tribunals find their hands tied by international treaties signed decades ago. Consequently, known perpetrators wielding foot-long steel cannot be legally expelled from the United Kingdom. They walk out of the holding cells and melt back into the underground economy with absolute impunity. Metropolitan police units watch in frustration as the same violent actors reappear on CCTV feeds days later. Neighborhoods that once thrived on evening foot traffic now resemble ghost towns after sundown. Small business owners are quietly installing reinforced security grills out of sheer desperation. Every emergency dispatcher dreads the inevitable surge of weekend distress calls involving sharp weapons. Paramedics arriving at crime scenes routinely face hostile crowds, attempting to obstruct their life-saving efforts. Hospitals across the capital are treating lacerations that combat medics usually see in active military theatres. Taxpayers essentially fund the extensive medical recovery of foreign nationals who actively despise the host culture. Mainstream media outlets often hesitate to publish the full demographic details of these violent encounters. Independent journalists, however, continue to leak internal police memos detailing the sheer scale of the demographic shift. Working-class families trapped in these volatile boroughs feel entirely abandoned by the political establishment. Promises of enhanced community policing echo hollowly when response times continually stretch beyond breaking points. The United Kingdom's penal system has officially reached a catastrophic breaking point, with operational capacity hovering precariously at 99%. Behind the high security walls, governors are reportedly signalling a total logistical collapse, unable to process the daily influx of new convictions. Faced with this unprecedented infrastructure crisis, Keir Starmer's administration has continuously deflected responsibility, framing the disaster as an inherited nightmare from the previous Conservative government. Downing Street insists that 14 years of chronic underfunding left them with absolutely no viable alternatives to manage the overflowing cells. Consequently, the Ministry of Justice authorised the highly controversial SDS-40 program, a desperate measure disguised as progressive penal reform. Under this emergency directive, tens of thousands of convicted individuals are automatically eligible for a release after serving a mere 40% of their mandated sentences. Analysts tracking the rollout confirm that over 30,000 offenders have already been quietly reintegrated into communities across the country. Probation services, already stretched incredibly thin, are structurally incapable of monitoring this sudden, massive wave of early releases. Official rhetoric promises strict supervision, yet frontline social workers anonymously report a system functioning entirely on blind faith. While Whitehall drafts lengthy memorandums defending the policy, the immediate consequences are rewriting the daily routines of ordinary citizens. Urban crime mapping reveals a chilling transformation of the capital streets once the sun goes down. After 7 o'clock in the evening, major metropolitan centres effectively transition into high-risk zones where violent actors operate with terrifying confidence. Perpetrators armed with machetes and heavy blades actively hunt for targets, acutely aware that police response times have drastically slipped. Security experts note that the evening vacuum of law enforcement leaves commercial districts practically defenseless against organized territorial disputes. This nocturnal reality has fundamentally altered the social psychology of British communities. Women navigating the city after dark are increasingly relying on location-sharing applications and private transport out of sheer necessity. The basic civil liberty of walking home safely has been replaced by a pervasive, suffocating fear of random, unprovoked violence. Parents are quietly redlining local maps, explicitly forbidding their children from entering specific postcodes that were entirely safe a decade ago. Entire neighborhoods have been designated as off-limits by local watch groups monitoring the surge in street-level robberies. Adding to this profound sense of public betrayal is the government's glaring failure to address deeply entrenched criminal syndicates. Despite Starmer's highly publicized electoral pledges to completely eradicate the grooming gang epidemic, investigative journalists reveal a grimly different reality. These sophisticated exploitation networks continue to operate with horrifying efficiency, often adapting their methods to bypass digital surveillance. Child protection agencies warn that vulnerable teenagers are still being systematically targeted in areas where community policing has effectively vanished. The failure to dismantle these specific syndicates strikes at the very core of the state's fundamental duty to protect its most defenseless citizens. However, the public's frustration is dangerously compounded by the stark, highly visible contrast in how the state deploys its remaining law enforcement resources. When unauthorized demonstrations or so-called far-right protests mobilize, the Home Office demonstrates a startling capability for rapid, overwhelming force. Dozens of heavily armored riot vans and territorial support groups are dispatched within minutes to contain dissenting political crowds. Government spokespeople rely on carefully sanitized language to describe incidents that terrify ordinary citizens. Describing a coordinated machete charge as a simple administrative disturbance no longer fools the electorate. Confidence in institutional authority is evaporating at a pace previously thought impossible in a developed Western democracy. Whispers of forming localized civilian defense patrols are gaining serious traction on encrypted messaging platforms. Authorities warn against vigilantism, yet offer no practical alternative for terrified residents seeking basic physical safety. Foreign criminal syndicates observe this systemic paralysis and view Britain as an incredibly soft target. Exploiting the asylum system has evolved into a highly lucrative, thoroughly industrialized continental enterprise. Westminster continues to debate minor legislative tweaks while the social fabric rips apart at the seams. Citizens are repeatedly told that diversity is their greatest strength, even as territorial violence erupts outside their front doors. Then, a highly explosive piece of digital evidence surfaced that plunged the already volatile streets into absolute, uncontrollable hell. Buried within the archives, an obscure pre-election campaign video featured the current Prime Minister explicitly stating his long-term vision. "I need 10 full years to implement all of my national plans." Suddenly, the puzzle pieces snapped together for the thousands of furious demonstrators currently occupying Parliament Square. Understanding the bureaucratic timeline is crucial to grasping the sheer scale of public outrage tearing through the capital. Securing full British citizenship and the accompanying right to participate in national elections typically takes exactly 5 years for newly arrived individuals. By the time the next general election cycle rolls around, this administration will be desperately fighting for a second consecutive term. Citizens fiercely accuse Downing Street of strategically assembling an alien army designed to permanently alter the electoral map. These supposedly imported citizens, having been granted asylum and welfare by the current regime, are statistically almost guaranteed to cast their ballots for Labour. Nigel Farage wasted absolutely no time capitalising on this explosive revelation during a heavily broadcasted emergency press conference. Opposition leader forcefully aligned himself with the growing theory that Whitehall is intentionally importing hundreds of thousands of guaranteed future voters. We are witnessing the deliberate, taxpayer-funded replacement of the traditional British electorate. Downing Street rapidly issued a blistering counter-statement, categorically dismissing the entire narrative as a baseless, xenophobic lie. However, the protesters standing in endless grocery queues are no longer buying it. Trust in the traditional media apparatus has thoroughly collapsed alongside the decaying infrastructure of London's outer boroughs. People cannot help but notice the stark contrast between how veterans are treated versus the red carpet reception given to undocumented migrants. Pumping over £4 billion into emergency hotel accommodations makes perfect sense if those occupants are viewed as future political capital.